Today's episode of Children of Heroes brought us to the sunny seaside town of Teignmouth in Devon, where we met with Ms Helena Čermáková, daughter of Flight Lieutenant Josef Čermák.
Thank you for participating in our project Children of Heroes. Your father was a pilot in the Royal Air Force. Could you tell us more about him?
Well, my father, when Czechoslovakia was taken over by the Germans, escaped Czechoslovakia and went to Poland, I believe, and was imprisoned with a friend of his, but then was able to leave. And he made his way, as far as I understand it, he made his way across to North Africa and worked with the Foreign Legion. But he didn't make his way to France, and I think worked in France, or flew in France, and then France started to fall, and then they made their way over to England and joined, I think there was 3 squadrons in England, and I think he was in the 311 Bomber Command. I think he did coastal watch. When he came over to England, he met my mother in London through the Czech Club in London, in Bedford Place, and they married in London in 1943. This is their marriage. In those days...
This is your father and
this is my father and my mother, yes. This is my English grandmother and my English aunt. And so those. If you notice, there's a lot of Czech airmen. I think they're Czech airmen, friends of my father's. My father then carried on being in the Air Force, but he had 2 crashes. One was quite serious.
Did he fly after?
I don't think he did. I think he was grounded, and I think it really annoyed him because he wanted to fly. But I think he was an instructor for a while. And then, of course, the war came to an end. And as soon as the war came to an end, I think he was one of the first pilots to go back to Prague. And he wrote a letter to my mother from Prague saying, "I've come back. I found out that my father died. My sister was put into a concentration camp because he had escaped. And I'm on my way back to Kostelec." And that was all he put in this letter, which we have, and I'm afraid my son has got it. And then my mother followed with myself, and they settled in Kostelec. And my father then joined the Czech Air Force. So we came back to Czechoslovakia after the war, wanting to live there, you know. And then in, I think it was 48 when the Russian coup came.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to escape as a family, but it wasn't possible because we kept being informed on, and I do remember that sort of secret period of our lives. And then they allowed the English women to come home. And so my father just said, "You're going to have to go, you need to go." And there is a letter somewhere that my mother wrote and said it was awful because apparently she said they had to hide in a forest or something so they could be together. And then he took us to the airport where we were going to fly back to England, but he had to hide in case somebody saw him. And I remember flying out on the plane. It was you know how you see refugees coming out of the belly of a plane rather than just seats, and we were sitting on the floor of the plane, and I remember being very sick. And my mother said she didn't know whether she'd ever see my father again. And he had to walk. She said she remembers him walking away, and how sad that was. My mother was a great writer, and this is actually what she said, what she remembered. And she said, "We shut the door on our life in Czechoslovakia. The communists had won. I wonder what would happen to all our treasured possessions, our personal things, but I knew no one could take away the memories. And then she goes on, Joseph, my Czech husband, an Air Force officer, was in hiding. They'd taken away his passport. The next day I was leaving him to fly back to the safety of Britain with the children. She said it was absolutely horrific, really. And so in the morning, cold and hungry, we arrived at the airport terminal. And I had said, is Daddy coming with us, Mummy? Joseph looked strained and near to tears. Take care of them for me. I looked behind and saw Joseph hurrying away, head down. I thought I would never see him again. But he then became friends with a civilian who had a plane. And they took the plane out as if they were just going to go circling around. And then they went off to West Germany. This is the actual plane that he escaped in. And it's in the museum. And it says in the museum that my father piloted the plane. It took some while for him to get to England because of it's amazing to think that my father fought in the war in Britain, and yet it took the British a long time to get my father over. If it hadn't been for my English grandmother, who was a doctor, and who wrote to Churchill and said, you can't leave them there. Churchill then did something about it, and my father was able to come to England. And I remember it very well because I was playing in the garden in Chippenham in Wiltshire, and I saw my father coming up the road, and I ran into the house and said to my mother, Daddy's coming up the road. And she said, no, don't be silly, you know how mothers do that, and I've done that to my own children. And she said, no. And I was so insistent that she came out, and he was coming up the path. And that's the first time we saw him. So after that, he joined the Air Force, the Royal Air Force. And we had various postings, Lincoln, Emsworth in the south of England, Thorney Island. And then he was asked to set up Bishop's Court in Northern Ireland. And he was setting up that airfield, which now is defunct, I have to say. And for that, he got the Air Force Cross from the Queen.
How important was it for him?
It was very important, because it was such an honour, really. And because the British would not promote him any further than a flight lieutenant, because he was Czech. And yet he was a major in the Czech Air Force before he left. And he really did resent that. And so in the end, after the AFC, he decided to immigrate to Canada. And he went to Canada, he left the Air Force, went to Canada, and was flying goods up to the Jew line of Canada, the early warning system. And we were just due to join him, but a fortnight before that happened, my father ditched a plane in the cold part of Canada because they got lost. And sadly, he died on the third day. My father's actually buried in Edmonton, in Canada.
There was a street named after him in his hometown.
Yes, there is. Again, but it's strange because it's...
Have you visited it?
I have. Yeah. And I have a photograph. Do you know, in April I went to a flower shop in Prague and I said I wanted to have a rose and for my father's memorial. And she said, was he one of the Czech? And I said, yes, you have this free. And she put all the Czech colours on it for me to take. It was just, they were heroes, she said. Helena, aged 2 years, her first photograph in Czechoslovakia, which was sent to my grandmother, my English grandmother. This is my father in England with me and my sister.
I saw that you decided to become a priest.
Yes, well, I don't know when I decided. I don't know when I decided. It just seemed to happen that I was called to that. It was at a time when I didn't realise at the time that there was a difficulty with the ordination of women. So I entered a time in the Church of England or the church in Wales where I was at the time, which was the same thing, when women were not allowed to be ordained priests. So I was in Wales at the time. I lived in Cardiff, and we formed a group of women who wanted to be ordained, and we pioneered it really, basically in Wales. And And that started, I suppose, beginning of the 80s. But I had to wait till 1988 when I was ordained a deacon. And then I had to wait 7 years because they still wouldn't allow women to be priests. And then eventually in 1995 they did, and I was ordained in Bristol as a priest. I began my career in hospitals. So I worked with the NHS in Cardiff, in the University Hospital Cardiff, as a deacon. So I knew I had to move on to my own chaplaincy, really. And so I moved to Bristol, and that's where I was ordained a priest. And I was a priest with the maternity hospital and the children's hospital in Bristol. And I was sort of vaguely headhunted for Jersey in the Channel Islands. I didn't really want to go and live on that island, but so I rang up my daughter and said, "Oh, what am I going to do?" And she said, "Mum, I want you to take this job," because she just wanted to come to Jersey, because I don't know whether you know, it's an island full of wonderful beaches, and she just wanted to be on the beach. I was there till 2006 and then decided that it was time to retire. And at that time I had friends in Cardiff who were lecturers at a theological college and who rang me up and said, "I hear you're going to retire, can you come and be a tutor or personal tutor to students who are going to be ordained in the church?" So I came back to Cardiff and did that for another 7 years. So this is the main church that Jack and I serve, and we're retired clergy really, but we have a huge rota every month, and last month I think we did 3 Sundays running. This is our main church, St Michael's and All Angels, which we like because it's what you call an Anglo-Catholic tradition, i.e. smells and bells. So we have incense and all that. We were married here in 2020, February the 1st. And it's named the Church by the Sea, because if we go out of this door and just across the road, you'll see the wall, and there you'll see the sea.
You have a special interest in icons.
I do. Do you have
some
examples? There's one. The only one I've really completed. And I'm just about to do another course. But I went to art college, so my interest has always been in art. And in all my chaplaincies in my work, I've introduced some artwork. And in particular in Jersey, I introduced stained glass windows in the corridor that led to intensive care, because I thought it was really important to have some colour. I've got a great interest in the Orthodox Church and their liturgy and their beauty. I don't know if you've ever been to an Orthodox church, have you? And it's just so beautiful. I mean, their liturgy, their actual liturgy is very beautiful, and the whole church is full of icons, and it just drew me really on a devotional level, really, as well. Not just painting it, because it's quite a prayerful process to paint an icon, because you have to consider it in a prayerful way, so yes, it just draws me really. And although the Czech Republic is actually Catholic, and I was brought up as a Roman Catholic because of my father,
How much do you feel your Czech heritage impacted your life?
Well, it is very strange. I wasn't brought up in Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic, but I feel very as if I've come home. It's just a strange feeling, and I just don't know how to articulate that, really. It's that Slavic feeling, and I've had my ancestry, what do you call it, the DNA done?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
And I'm half, and the Slavic thing is quite predominant in my genes. So when I lived in Wales, so I wouldn't call myself English. It doesn't, it's a funny feeling. I don't know how else to articulate it. I really don't.
Do you have anything else you would like to add?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to look again at all the stuff, although I can see I haven't got enough stuff here with me. I mean, I do look at it from time to time. It does raise up a sadness in me. The thought of my father may sometimes make me tearful, because there's so much that I don't know about him. The only remembrance I have of my father, it seems as when I was 12, I shut down a bit after he died, but I do remember so very vividly, because he was a great fisherman, and in Ireland he used to go fishing for salmon, and he used to sometimes take me with him, and we would sit in the river, and I could see where we were sitting now, and he would say, "Be very quiet, because the fish won't bite if you make a noise," and I'd sit very quietly with him. And I think there's something about that that has given me a sense of wanting to be quiet. But that's my abiding image of my father. But my sadness is that I never really knew him. I only know him through his letters, and sometimes I can't visit that because it just makes me sad.